Light from Lantern presents Knit a Spell. I'm Magical Maker Katie Rempe.
And I'm the maker of magic, James Devine.
Join us as we stitch together the symbiotic relationship between crafting
And the craft.
Welcome back to another episode of Knit a Spell.
Knit a spell.
Yeah.
We should make a little jingle, maybe.
Yeah, every week we'll just start singing a new jingle. How about
Oh,
that?
no. That might not be good.
Well, how's it been? How you been doing?
Pretty good, Beautiful summer in Seattle.
I know.
What could we want more? It's the best place to live, summertime.
Oh, yeah. I'm always a fan of like the 14-hour days that we have at this point of the year.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Yep, waking up at 5 a.m. and it's totally bright outside. I personally like it. Most people maybe don't, but I like it.
Yep. It's
Yep.
amazing.
Yep.
Yep.
It's especially inspiring because it makes me want to do a lot more, including hang out in my craft/office room, which is conveniently our topic today, which is making a dedicated craft room, and how you might want
Yes.
to go into that even as a beginner.
Yeah, making space. So I think it's important to have dedicated space for things.
Mm-hmm.
If at least mentally, right?
Right.
And I mean, as we talk about this topic today, I don't want it to be like if you don't have like a 5-room house or something, you can't
Right.
do it. Like to be able to have dedicated space in our minds, or dedicated space to say, this is when, or this is how I'm going to do a particular thing, either magic or crafting or both. And making that space is something that when I'm teaching our students magic, we encourage people to make a space, make a dedicated space. It really does make a difference, and there's reasons why that's important, right? So
Absolutely.
I in this episode, what I think would be fun is to compare why and how I teach people to make space for magic, and
Ooh.
then compare with how you would recommend people and have recommended to people they make space for crafting.
Ooh. Yes,
What do you
I love
think?
this.
Should we do
Yes.
that?
Let's do it.
Okay. I think I recommend that people make space for magic because it helps contain so magic is very much a function of imagination and of visioning. And making a space helps to crystallize that vision and contain that imaginative formula, so that
Mm.
I can go to the top of my dresser, look at the altar that I've set up, see the elements and the deities, and be in that space very easily, which is
Mm.
hard to do in our regular mundane world.
For sure. Yes, that's a great point and is equally as important with knitting, even if it's just, something small like a project bag.
Yeah, what's the why? Why is it important to have a dedicated like space, whatever it might be, for knitting or for
So,
projects or
sure,
for
yeah,
craft?
very similar like what you said. I mean, it literally contains the project, from just something as small as a project bag, which, will keep your yarn safe and your project sort of contained. It's like your little travel bundle of knitting. You could do it anywhere at that point. And, maybe your space at that time is like just your chair, and you bring your bag
Yeah.
to your chair and you sit there and that's your space.
Yeah.
That's where you can do your knitting and maybe you have your TV or, your other things are around you right there. It doesn't have to be a whole room. Sometimes just having just small bag with all of your little
Yeah.
things is just what
Yeah.
you need.
I think another why for having a space is it's inspiring.
Mm,
And I think that when you go to a space, whatever it might be, there's something about like, oh, it's right there. It's in front of me. This is a new thing. And so
mm-hmm.
it isn't tucked away somewhere. It's visible. And I'm inspired by it. And so I've selected really beautiful items to put there. And I'm inspired to do magic. And because it's gorgeous and because it's things that I've procured on my own, right? And
Yep.
I remember that when you gifted me with my beginning knit kit, I was digging into that bag and there's
hmm
all these new little things. And I'm like,
Yep.
ooh, what's this thing? What's that thing? So do you
Yeah.
think that's a similar why to have a dedicated space?
Oh yeah, and I think that's probably why, I mean, people have a craft room, obviously, but then also love going to dedicated stores that have that. Like a local yarn store is really just like an enormous version of what you, in theory, want your probably craft room to be.
Right.
If we had all the resources in the world, wouldn't we just have like our own magic shop or whatever?
Totally.
So it's almost like bringing that in. You have the yarns that you bought for maybe a specific project, and those re-inspire you, even if you haven't gotten to it yet. Um, or your little notions and maybe the way they catch the light and how you display them. All of those things are like mundane objects, but they're magical altogether and so inspiring when they all hit you at once.
Right. And I think also there's this when I walk, we are lucky, fortunate enough to have an entire room dedicated to magic in our
Mm,
home. And when you open the door and you walk in, there are all the senses are stimulated by the room. The sights you see, so you see your vision of the elements and the statuary and the decor, the
mm,
scent of oils and herbs, the feeling of it's just the temperature is slightly different in there for some reason.
yeah,
The sound, it is slightly quieter in there for some strange, well, it's not strange, it's energetic, right? It's
totally.
really fascinating, right? The
Yes.
feeling in there is just different. When you walk in, it's like suddenly you're in a different place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there's all of the senses are different in there. And I think that is the thing that a space has. And even if it's a small shelf in your room, or if it's a entire room in your home,
Sure.
there is something about like having your senses stimulated that is very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Especially if you're like in a rut or, you just are looking for a new project. Just immersing yourself in things that you already have can be very inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's cool.
I actually, I remember walking into your magic room and you're absolutely right. The feel, more than, I mean, the smell obviously is like very like, ooh, takes you away, but, and the sights. But for me, it really was the feel of the room, the energy of the room. It was like, the rest of your house was so clean and airy. And then that one room is so, it felt concentrated in there. And I
Right.
feel that's similar when I come into my craft/office room. It's concentrated. There's work to be done. It has a specific feel because that's what you do in there, and I really love that. So
Yet holds the energy of what has happened in that room,
yeah,
right?
yep,
There has been crafting in here, whether it's
right.
witch crafting or
hmm
knit crafting.
Yeah, maybe we don't have oils and herbs, but we certainly have lanolin and wool washes that we use that
Yeah.
have scents. So there's a
Also,
lot of crossover there.
I think lanolin is an oil.
Oh,
Yeah, right.
oh, duh. Great point, Jim. Oh my
So
goodness.
let's talk about what the magic spaces look like. And I want to start with like a progression because I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important to make this accessible to everyone. I don't want to be exclusive or, anyone can do magic anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also want to say all of these things, especially from the magic side, are optional. They're tools.
Mm.
I'm going to quote something from my amazing late high priestess. She used to say this: you have everything you need to do magic standing naked in the woods.
There you go.
And what that means is we are magic. We are made of the divine.
Mm.
And what we have as far as a space, like the earth is sacred. The earth is our temple. And you can pick up a stick from the ground or use your finger
Mm.
and use that as a wand to create and to imagine a magic circle. The things that we are going to talk about as far as a space and as we're talking about different magical tools and concepts, they're all optional. They are to help us with our imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So, from the magical side, these tools are optional. I think from the knitting or making side, some of the tools are
A little more practical.
perhaps perhaps helpful. I mean,
Yeah,
I've seen people hand knit
certainly. There's
big
ways around
blankets.
everything. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But but I think just to know that like you are can opt in to many of these things, and certainly with knitting, you don't need to buy the most expensive thing in the world to make it work and to learn.
Absolutely. Yep. In fact, I would say that more creative solutions come from not having the ease of simply being able to buy whatever it is that you want. I mean, that's like the whole point of making a sweater, right? You could buy one for $20 or like get one for $1 at the thrift store, but like, where's the magic in there? So,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah,
it's
this
it's
is
different.
the concept. This is the concept of creative constraints,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Those constraints drive creativity, so it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
cool.
I've actually
Yeah.
found that some of my best ideas come from really needing to be forcibly put out of my box. So, again, all of these things, just like you said, can be as simple as you want or as elaborate as you want, and ultimately have the same outcome. So,
Right. Right.
yes. So, what would you say, like, step one, at least generally, would be for like a magical space?
Yeah, so if someone's starting to get into magic and they're interested in setting up a magical space, I would say if you don't have, an extra room laying around empty in your house,
Mm-hmm.
st- you can start with a small space. Lots of people start with the top of their dresser
Mm,
as a great option for an altar. One
mm.
of the reasons is there's often a mirror, which can be very
Oh.
helpful to do magical work, to look at yourself in the mirror as you're doing work. There's a lot of sort of magic that can be done that way.
Mm,
Alternatively, you can use a shelf on a wall that you install. Um, so there's a lot of ways to set up a small shelf or the top of your dresser as an altar. It's often a place that's already exists that can be
mm,
cleared or can be used. Other stuff can be organized or incorporated, and that can be dedicated.
mm,
We often recommend putting an altar cloth down. So that's a special piece of fabric that's used only for this in order to sort of separate this. It's not just the surface of your dresser or of the shelf. It makes it special and
mm,
and makes it distinct from the mundane shelf that you have.
mm,
And then on the altar, you can make it an altar to a deity, or you can make it a working altar with representations of the elements. However, you want to do that, but that's how most people start. That's certainly how I started.
mm.
Is the top of my dresser as an
Same.
altar.
Yep, ditto. Using
Hmm.
it right now, in fact. Yep,
Right?
yep, exactly. And
How
do you think it's
how
helpful? Sorry,
no
do you think
no
it's
go ahead.
helpful to have it in the bedroom? I mean, you want it like typically in a room you're probably in every day, right?
Well, when I started, I did not have my own apartment. I had roommates.
Mm,
And so my default was I couldn't really put it in the living room
mm-hmm.
because it wasn't, my roommates weren't, witchy,
Yeah, a
right?
little public.
And it was also my personal altar,
Mm.
right?
Oh, okay. Yep.
So I wasn't sharing this practice with the people that I lived with.
Mm-hmm.
Now that my husband and I are doing it and we share our practice, we share the magic room and we have our own, shared practice.
Mm.
So that's something to consider is where you would put it is based on that.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
had it in my bedroom because it was my personal practice and I didn't share that practice with the other people I lived with.
Mm.
Whether regardless of your relationship with those people, that's probably one of the determining factors.
Sure.
Um, uh, your question was where did I put it? So I put it in my own bedroom for that reason. Certainly it could be anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I also liked it in my bedroom because it was personal, and if my parents, like, let's say I wasn't really out about being a witch,
Mm-hmm.
I could put it in a place that was easy to keep private and away from disparaging eyes.
Sure. Okay. Interesting. Very good.
Yeah.
Just something to consider. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. All right.
So, what's a dedicated space for crafting. I mean, right now I just have my crafting bag hanging off the back of my doorknob in the bedroom.
I would say the knitting bag is the dedicated knitting space, at least step one. It houses, your project that you're working on currently, all the yarn probably for the project, maybe any relevant notions. Certainly does for me. And then, that becomes like basically your mobile altar almost for making. You can take it anywhere. It protects your project. It keeps it contained in its own way, even if it's not like contained in a room. So yeah, I would say step one for making and knitting in general would be like the project bag is sort of your
Yeah.
dedicated space. Hey, magical makers! Are you looking for a fun summertime project? Try my no sweat mason cozies, now available in 2 different sizes. You can save 50% on this pattern through July 31st by using the code KNITASPELL, that's all one word, on Ravelry at checkout. These beverage covers not only keep your hands dry, they're also a fun way to identify whose drink belongs to who. Cheers! Hey Jim, let's talk about a palm reading for a sec.
Oh yeah, my favorite topic.
So, I don't think a lot of people necessarily think of getting a palm reading, but my palm reading with you was awesome, and it actually helped with a lot of preconceived notions that I had of the craft before now.
Oh, you had preconceived notions about palmistry? What were they?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm pretty literal. So I thought having a short lifeline might mean you have a short life, or that a
Right.
star on your palm is bad.
Oh, that's interesting. Both of those are common. A short lifeline does not mean a short life. It actually means a life of connection with the divine and learning and creating type of life. And a star in your palm is a sign of spiritual gift. Those are two things that are dispelled right away. I know there's a lot of things on the palm that people
Yeah,
think are good or bad, right? There's nothing inherently negative in your palm. You can use all the tools, all the markings. They are associated with your strengths, your personality, and things you can use in your life.
absolutely. I really love that modern take on palmistry, and it actually really resonated in my reading. I think everyone would enjoy a reading from you. And, dear listener, if you too would like a fantastic experience that offers insight, direction, and clarity, I highly suggest booking a session with my dear friend James Devine, and you can find more information at thedivinedhand.com.
Where do people go from there? Like, what's the next thing that, like, and what is it that has me move outside of a project bag?
Mm-hmm.
What has
Well,
me be like, I need a shelf or I need a cubby or something?
yeah. Well, if you're like me, you obtain a lot of yarn, and then you quickly realize you need an organizational situation to make this not look like a hoarding issue. Because if it's organized, it's a collection. But if it's in a pile, at least that's what I always told myself.
Oh,
So for
I wait a
me,
minute. I just realized something.
hmm?
There's a big bag blob next to Richard's side of the bed.
Oh,
I think it's yarn.
well, there may be a yarn shelf in your future. That was next step for me.
Oh, I think we do need a yarn shelf.
Well, allow me to recommend what probably every knitter at this point has upgraded to, which is the IKEA cubby shelves for yarn. Every yarn
Oh,
store, I think, has them as their main staple for organization because it's really great to like layer hanks on top of each other. So for me, that was my next step. It was a shelf, a cabinet, something to house the yarn because that was quickly becoming something that was taking up more space than like the needles that I would procure with them or, buttons or notions things. So yeah, a larger shelf probably for yarn would be the next biggest step. What about for me?
got it.
Or
Got it.
magic?
Yeah. Oh, for magic. Okay.
Probably similar.
So, okay. So, what happens how do I know I'm ready to move beyond the top of my dresser?
Mm,
Similarly, you start to procure oils
mm,
and herbs, and you decide you're going to do a little project like make your own incense or make or do a
mm,
candle magic spell or something that takes up a little more space than the top of your dresser. And you're
mm,
using either the kitchen table or you're using your makeup table or your other little shelf or something in the house or in your
mm.
bedroom, and you've laid out a sheet or a tablecloth on top of your bed and you're mixing herbs or you're doing something and then you have to clean all that up and you're like frustrated, right?
Mm,
And so this is when you start to think about another option, which is sometimes like a little cabinet or a roll top desk or
mm,
something. I've seen people do different things. If there's a closet available or if there's something else, you start to just feel like I need more space than just the top of my dresser for
mm,
the rest of my crafting or herbs or oils or things that I have.
mm.
And so that's where that starts to graduate into, and folks have, you know, often they have either a part of their closet or a part of something where they start to like put stuff and need a space to do that. And as people move into, their own space, or you start to make decisions on where you live based on, is there space for my craft,
Yep.
right? At
That's
least for witchcraft. And I am pretty sure I've seen people make decisions on where they live based on their
Oh yeah.
craft.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Craft room. Oh yeah. I, as many dream of like an entire like attic floor studio of like a yarn establishment and inspirational place, but I'm just contained to the one room, which is great, more than what a lot of people have. Um, but yeah, I think the next step is definitely moving out into probably more of a room, because then your one cabinet becomes two cabinets, and then you need some things to, oh, maybe I want to purposefully display some things that look nice, as opposed to just, having them hidden away. You want them out because now you're making the room to be like your aesthetic inspiration as well.
But you
Um,
want to be able to shop from your own house.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want to have to clean up after every night's spell work, even if you're not done. Same with making, especially with like, I mean, knitting and sewing back when I used to do that. It would always drive me nuts when I would have a shared space and I would have to clean up the project every night. It felt like such a waste of time. And also, it felt like it stunted the progress, having to go through that extra part to redo it, it sort of like stopped the energy flow. So again, having this room just keeps it going, keeps the whole energy in there without you having to like close it up.
Right. Well, that's really true with magical work. I mean, a lot of times you're doing some kind of magical work over several days.
Mm,
And so having a space where you can burn a candle, now you don't ever burn a candle unattended,
right.
but that you're doing a working, you're leaving the platter, or the candles on a plate, and you're burning it over several days at a time,
Mm,
and leaving that up, that's something where you want a space to be able to do that. Or you have some other thing that's, in progress. You can't dismantle it every day and reassemble it, right? You want that
mm-hmm.
to stay assembled and do it over time. So for sure, as the collection of magical stuff and things come together, you start to think about like a craft room. And we call our room a craft room, just like a crafter does, right?
There you go.
It's kind of cute because when we say, oh yeah, we have a really marvelous craft room, of course people think about it like, oh, what are the crafts you do?
Mm-hmm.
And i
Well,
just i just giggle inside.
herbalism.
you know little magic.
Yeah, that old thing.
That'll thing. So that's, one of the things is the moving into the room. And it's important to think about, I think probably very similarly, is how are we going to use the room?
Mm-hmm.
For us, we want the room to be enough space to move in. We want to be able to actually circle in with people in the room to be in the space, right?
Mm,
So, unlike certain rooms that I've seen where you would maybe have a table in the center, like your sewing machine might be in the middle with a large sort of like working
yep.
counter space, and then maybe counter and shelving around, like there isn't a need to like move or circle around with humans,
Mm-hmm.
altar in the center or on the side. We want an open space in the center so that we have space to like actually circle with humans. And so that's one of the considerations. Our room is a little bit small to be able to do that
Mm.
with our group, but that is the ultimate dream, is to have a room large enough to be able to, actually physically circle,
Yeah.
create a circle of people and to
Ooh.
form that. So,
Interesting. I never kind of thought that the magical part would be potentially more social than the crafting part. It's because of the way you just detailed like the way you would use the space. I would never consider like, oh, let's have 12 crafters over and we'll all craft together. I mean, I guess you could. That would be technically like a knitting circle. But for me, I'm like, oh no, that would be so distracting for me to have that because it would turn into more of a social event, I think, for
right.
knitters.
Well, for
Again,
us,
I think that's the intent you have to go in
right.
with, but
Well, that's because we're running a coven, right?
yeah,
And
there
so
you go.
when we run a coven, it's the coven comes over and we, do coven things.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess most people would probably be working on their individual craft where you
Yeah,
guys are working together usually.
right.
Yeah,
So if
interesting.
we're doing a solitary practice,
Mm,
a room can work perfectly for a solitary or a couple that is doing magic together. The room is the size of a bedroom, and
mm,
that works perfectly fine. But
yep.
if you're going to assemble a coven of 10 to 13 people, then, having a space that's big enough for 10 to 13 people to gather and circle up, it isn't really a social event, it's a magical event. But
Mm-hmm.
having a temple, large enough to do that is a dream. But that gets us to, like, that really does get us to the ultimate emanation of a magical space, which
Mm-hmm.
is like the church, the temple, the store, the
Yeah.
type of thing, right? Like, I always dream of having like witchcraft shop in the front, magical
Mm.
temple in the back, and
Ooh.
the Zodiac Club in the basement,
Oh,
right?
stop. Yes, and a sick Airbnb in the top.
In the top. Yes, exactly. Like a haunted Airbnb in the top. Yeah,
Ooh,
exactly.
yes.
Right. That's like this ultimate fantasy of like, and then of course the associated, you know, 500 acres out in the, like,
Yes.
wilderness to do retreats and,
Oh
like,
my gosh. Yes.
forage
I
in the land.
This is exactly actually almost very similar to what I want as well, which is tons of land and the ability to have people out for retreats, knitting and making. That's actually a huge thing for us too. Having goats, having sheep, all of the
Yeah,
relevant material. Oh, I can't wait. 5-year
this
plan,
could
right?
all work. This is our 5-year plan. Yeah. So
Wonderful.
what
We'll
is
just
the
tie it all together.
ultimate? So the ultimate is like, I mean, I have a friend who lives in a house that has this attic that you're describing.
Oh.
She does felting. She's my friend who felts cashmere sweaters that she gets
Mm.
from thrift stores, and she has organized them by color on these shelves. It's
Mm.
the most satisfying attic to walk into. It's absolutely
Ooh.
divine, and she's a tremendously cool human being.
Ooh.
So this whole attic is like an L-shaped attic. It's absolutely amazing to walk into. But it is kind of like walking, like the same feeling you get when you walk into a store that's really well merchandised, where
Mm-hmm.
you have like yarns organized and crafts organized by color, or they're organized in some way, either uh, by manufacturer or by
Like weight or
material,
whatever.
and
Yep.
then they're by color, and you're
Mm.
just like, there's something so satisfying about that ombre effect of like the
It sure
colors.
is. Yes. Oh my
So
gosh. I
is
don't know
that the
why, but it's
ultimate?
so good.
Yeah, is that the ultimate for the craft room? Is that the craft room becomes?
I think so. Yeah, it becomes, your inspirational space and it becomes sort of a reflection of your own aesthetic too, which is something we were talking about earlier. It's how do you want to display things? What type of things do you want to display? It just depends on, what your focus is and whatnot. I always really liked organizing things by weight of yarn because I wanted to be able to just, okay, I want this thickness. I already know my head, shawl, whatever, and I just want to be able to grab it. But again, it's going to be very personal. Yeah, and I mean, I would love to have just a perfectly um, merchandised room where no customers come to like smash right in
Mess
through
it
the
up.
yarn. Because I'll tell you what, Jim, having worked at a yarn store, when I would
Wait,
mop,
what do customers do? That
uh,
is the most annoying thing.
they shop there.
I mean, you said something about do they
Yes.
poke?
So
What is it?
I used to liken it to watching The Price is Right. There was a game called Punch a Bunch, and you would punch through these little like paper holes, and there would be like prizes inside. And so what I always found that customers would do when they came into the yarn store is you would just finish organizing a cubby. It was beautiful. Maybe it was by color. They're all stacked perfectly. They're even. It's wonderful. And it just drives customers. They see it. They see the perfection. And then suddenly they need to put their whole hand in it. And it's just poof, destroyed. But it's because I know it was so enticing that you just have to get all in there. But as the person organizing it, I was like, no.
Oh, I thought maybe customers would smash like hanks of yarn.
Oh, well, they kind of smash their face in them a little bit. That's similar, right? The smell, the feel, it's all part of the tactile experience.
Oh my God, so
Yep.
funny. Well, so what is your suggestions for folks?
Mm-hmm.
What's
I
your,
would.
so if they, where do they start? If someone wants to create a space
Mm-hmm.
for their crafting, where do they start?
I think like anything, starting small is the key. Don't overwhelm yourself with, you have a dream perhaps of a craft room or something in the future, but you got to get steps to get there. And one of those steps is starting small and not overspending, perhaps, using your imagination on different ways that you can maybe save money or obtain certain things without it being, like full price out there or investing in a million things. I know you had a really good suggestion. I'm excited for you to share as well.
I mean, I agree 100% with what you said is we live in a society that is driven by out of control consumerism,
Hmm.
and we don't need to fall into that trap ourselves. We can use what we have.
Mm-hmm.
If you're listening to this podcast, you probably are already a crafter and probably have a lot of stuff
Mm-hmm.
already that you can use what you have. Even if, and try to emulate and bring up that inspiration to use things you already have. What if it was buy nothing month and you just had to, the creative constraint was use what you have? What could you make? Could you make
Yep.
something amazing? Could you make something out of just remnants? And what would it be like to knit something or craft something out of the remnants of stuff that you have,
I
right?
love that.
Whatever your craft is.
Mm-hmm.
And so with magic, this is similar, right? You can start with what you have and with things that you have lying around the house. You can also then, the next step is thrift stores are a great way to
Mm.
reuse things that are already out there. So
Yes.
you can go to a thrift store and maybe it was a candelabra with a place for three candles
Mm.
before. And when you see it, it becomes a place for a candle that represents the goddess, a candle that represents the god, and a
Mm.
candle that represents the fae,
There you
right?
go.
Maybe there's a candelabra that has, maybe it was an Advent wreath, right? With
Hmm.
four candles, right, in it. Well, now you have candles for the four elements,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Maybe it's a little ceramic bowl that doesn't really seem to have a purpose. It's too small to be anything that you could eat out of.
Mm-hmm.
It's too big. It just is this weird size. It's too big to really be, you know,
Mm.
can something.
Like a little
Maybe you
notions
could put
holding
some
up.
sand in it and it's a sensor for your incense, right?
Oh.
Now you're starting to see things. Maybe you see this weird pot and it has 3 feet. It's ceramic. It has a lid and two handles. That's a cauldron, right? Maybe it's from the
Oh.
70s and it's brown and it, was sold as a Dutch oven of some kind, but you can use it as a magical cauldron for purposes, right? So
Ooh.
you start to see things at the second at the thrift stores, and with the right kind of eyes, you start to see them as magical tools that you can buy for pennies,
Oh, yes.
fractions of a penny on the dollar.
This rings again very true with the crafting arena or knitting making because very similarly, you can find, if you're willing to put in a little bit of work sometimes, really amazing finds at like a thrift store, secondhand store, consignment store that are, like maybe really ugly, outdated cashmere sweaters. But guess what? That is full of yarn. And there are so many tutorials and things online to show you how to undo all of the yarn and you could repurpose that into something brand new. It's easy to launder. It's going to be way, way, way more inexpensive than buying it, brand new. And plus, you're doing a good service to the world by reusing something.
Right. Well,
Um,
that's my friend buys cashmere sweaters,
yep,
felts them in an old, recycled, reused washing machine.
perfect.
She washes cashmere on hot water in an old
Mm-hmm.
washing machine. The sweater shrinks like crazy and felts itself. Now she has fabric that she can cut into anything. She makes stuffed animals for babies. She makes hats. She makes other sweaters out of it. She makes patchwork quilts
Mm,
and cashmere. And because it's felted, it kind of has this squish factor that is
yes.
unbelievably satisfying. You can't stop squishing it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah. And that's, again, it does such a good service to reduce, reuse, recycle, all that. Um, and proves our point that, again, you don't have to spend $1 million to get something really nice if you're
As
willing to get a
bougie
little
as
creative.
as bougie as cashmere, baby.
That's right. Yes, it's available, just maybe not where you expect. So
Well, it's no longer available in Seattle because my friend has purchased all of the cashmere at every
that's
thrift
right.
store, so you can no longer find it.
That's right. And now that everyone's listened to this, they also will be the person buying all the cashmere.
Right.
So good
So
on you.
yeah, my friend is like, "Thanks, Jim, for ruining it for me."
You just outed me. That's right. Oh my goodness. Oh, well, this has been so inspiring. I actually now I'm like, I want to go and reorganize my room again.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We talk about organization. I think one of the things that I also would say is be intentional, right?
Mm,
So, one of the things that is important is the spiritual hygiene of your space is to be intentional about your space. If you leave your space, one of the things about a room is out of sight, out of mind. You close the door, and when you go in there and it's a mess, you're like, ah, forget it. And you close the door
mm,
again, right? Well,
yep.
that's important. You got to get in there and make it yours and aesthetics are important.
Yes.
Aesthetics are inspiring. If you make it beautiful, if you make it nice, if you organize it and clean it to the level at which it's enjoyable to you, it doesn't
Yes.
need to be perfect. I'm not saying you need to, buy into all that sort of patriarchal BS, but
Right.
make it something awesome for you that you really love being in. That's important because you're creating magic, whether it's crafting or witchcrafting.
Mm-hmm.
You are really accessing your imagination. Imagination is a fragile thing. It's like
Yep.
it's like beautiful tissue paper laying on water. The
Gosh, yeah.
minute you touch the water, it's going to, totally dissolve. And
Mm,
so, the aesthetics really help keep it together. So I really encourage people to consider aesthetics when setting up their altar, when setting up their spaces, when keeping
mm.
their spaces organized. Our space could use with a little organization, as you saw,
Well.
right? It still has an aesthetic,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a little like its messiness is sort of an aesthetic in a
I
way because
agree. I agree.
it's got a little bit of that like the wizards have been
Mm.
working. The
It's
old
a work in
wizards,
progress. Yeah. Yeah.
the wizards are kind of messy in this space.
They're very active around here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, but it could be organized a little better. So
Mm-hmm. Oh,
the answer is also often not more storage space. Every time that we
bingo.
say, I just need more storage, no, get rid of crap.
Yes. Be discerning. I mean, that's good for literally everything. Life, magic, making. Be discerning. Yeah. If it if it's a clutter and you don't need it, if it's old, get rid of it. I know we talked about this in our retrograde episode, but it still applies. Yeah, it's Same for the crafting room. If it's messy, because, I have threads everywhere and there's stuff everywhere, I'm not going to be inspired to go in there. So having a little bit of, like, I guess, I don't know, forward thinking to prepare it for your future self to be a little bit nicer is a nice gift, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cleaning, hygiene, spiritual hygiene, physical hygiene, the hygiene for your room. Those are important things. And they really bring some great energy,
Yep.
some freshness, some inspiration.
Yep. If you're not inspired to go into the room, nothing's going to happen with
Right.
your magic or your making.
Yep.
So, yep, you got to help the space be worth the making.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, what else? Is there anything else we can give for people as a little background of things?
I want people to make their space, own their space,
Mm-hmm.
and be in it. And,
Big or
um,
small.
however that is, and let us know, comment, review this episode. Let us know in your review on
Mm-hmm.
this episode whether it worked for you or not. Drop us a DM on Instagram at Light from Lantern or at Knit a Spell.
Mm-hmm.
You can email us, you can contact us,
Yep.
share us, or I would love photographs of your magical space and
Mm-hmm.
tag us on Instagram and let us know, like, were you inspired to create a magical space or a craft space, and how did it work out? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, both Katie and I will comment on that if you tag us, for sure.
Absolutely. I love seeing other people's organizational ideas and just craft room spaces in general. They're very inspiring. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I would love for anyone to tag us. And you can also drop us an email at knittaspellpodcast@gmail.com.
I can't wait. You got to check out Katie at Light from Lantern. There is some new stuff that is cooking at Light from Lantern, and I want everyone to be subscribing and setting and checking her out. So do not miss Katie at Light from Lantern or on her website, lightfromlantern.com.
Oh.
Check her out.
Well, very similarly, Jim has some very exciting things happening currently and in the future this year. So be sure to catch him on Instagram at DivineHandJim and on the interwebs at thedivinehand.com.
Thanks,
Yes.
Katie.
Hey, anytime. I actually was just looking at your more recent newsletter about your class and everything. So if people want, advanced knowledge of what's going on with Jim in the palmistry realm in general, you should definitely sign up for his newsletter, which you can find, again, at thedivinehand.com. Ah, well, wonderful. I hope this inspired people. I look forward to becoming inspired by our listeners' ideas. And until next week, Jim, have a great
See you
one.
in this magical space next week.
That's right. We'll see you then. This episode is a wrap. If you enjoyed what you heard, go ahead and follow us on your favorite podcast streaming app. And don't forget, you can see full video episodes of Knit a Spell on Light from Lantern's YouTube channel.